breakfast, I noticed something strange in the trash. My photo, torn, crumpled, covered in coffee grounds. Before I could reach for it, I heard my grandson's voice. "Mom says the photo album only keeps people she likes." I said nothing, just smiled weakly, pretending it didn't sting. But inside I was shaking. Later that afternoon, my lawyer's car pulled into the driveway. He handed me a brown envelope, the papers for the sale of the house. "Stay with me until the end of my story and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to see how far my story travels." The photograph still lay there, faintly smiling up from 2 decades ago, when my hair was chestnut, not silver. I picked it up carefully, wiping away the stains. "Grandma? What are you doing?" little Noah asked, peeking around the corner. I hid the photo in my apron pocket. "Just cleaning, sweetheart," I replied softly. He tilted his head, thinking. Mom said some people don't deserve to be remembered. Those words pierced deeper than any blade. I had long suspected my daughter was erasing me from her life, but hearing it from Noah made it real. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Go play outside, my love." When he left, I stood alone in my kitchen, the one I'd built from nothing over 43 years. This was the home where I'd raised her, the home I'd fought to keep after her father died, and yet, for the past 7 years, I'd been treated as a guest in my own house. "Mom, did you finish the coffee again?" Ara's sharp voice broke my thoughts. At 39, she looked just like me at that age, but with none of the softness. "I bought more yesterday," I said. "It's in the pantry." She sighed loudly. "I told you to leave it on the counter where I can see it." I smiled faintly. "Sorry. Habit, I guess." Truth is, I'd put it in the pantry on purpose. The same place it had always been, a small act of quiet defiance. She opened the pantry and began rummaging through it, scattering the neat rows I'd arranged that morning. "Peter and I are having guests tonight," she said. "You'll watch the kids upstairs." Not a question, a command, in my home. "Actually, I have plans tonight," I replied. She turned, eyebrows raised. "Plans? What plans could you possibly have?" "I'm meeting with Stanley Cooper," I said calmly, "my late husband's lawyer." Her eyes narrowed instantly. "Why?" "Just some paperwork that needs updating." She didn't press further, but I could see the flicker of unease. The truth? I had made that appointment that very morning. 7 years of being treated like a burden had finally led me to one decision, one I couldn't delay any longer. That night, while laughter and music filled the house downstairs, I sat across from Stanley Cooper in his quiet office. "You're certain about this?" he asked gently. I nodded. "It's time, Stanley. They've lived here rent-free for 7 years. They've taken over everything, every space, every decision. And now..." I pulled out the crumpled photo from my pocket. "Now my own daughter is erasing me while I'm still alive." Stanley exhaled slowly. "It won't be easy. They'll fight this." "I know," I said softly, "but I'm 68. I just want peace in the years I have left." The next afternoon he returned, envelope in hand. Not eviction papers, just the final step in reclaiming the life and home I had built with love. Long before they ever called it theirs. I couldn't bring myself to be that harsh. So instead of eviction papers, the documents on my desk outlined a simple choice, a formal rental agreement or a clear timeline to find their own place. I sat there for hours, staring at the papers, my heart heavy with hesitation. I knew that once I handed them to Ara and Peter, there would be no going back. Everything between us would change. But then I heard Peter's voice echoing from the hallway, harsh, commanding Noah to be quiet. Moments later, I heard my grandson crying softly. That was the moment I knew. I couldn't stay silent anymore. It was time to reclaim my home. And my dignity. The papers stayed on my desk for 3 days while I gathered my courage. Every time I reached for them, memories pulled me back. 7 years of memories. It hadn't started with cruelty. It began with a desperate phone call. Ara was crying, saying Peter had lost his job. They couldn't make rent. They might end up on the street with little Noah. "Just for a few months, Mom," she promised, until we get back on our feet. I remember helping them move in. Peter complaining the guest room was too small, Ara rearranging my furniture without even asking. I said nothing. I wanted to be understanding. 2 months later, she announced she was pregnant with Lily. "We'll start looking for our own place after the baby," she said. But by the time Lily was born, Peter had found a new job that paid less. "We're saving up," became their favorite phrase. A few months turned into a few years, and then into 7. One afternoon, as I washed dishes, I remembered my 65th birthday, the night I realized how far I'd been erased from my own life. I came downstairs to find a party happening in my living room, strangers sitting on my couch, laughing over my food. "Oh, we didn't think you'd be interested," Ara said casually. "It's just Peter's work friends." That night, I stayed in my bedroom, listening to the laughter through the walls, feeling like a ghost in my own home. Then came the smaller humiliations. Peter threw away my favorite armchair, calling it too old. Ara repainted rooms without asking. My garden tools vanished. My special dishes got chipped and broken. When I tried to speak up, the answer was always the same. "Don't be so uptight, Mom. It's just stuff." But it wasn't just stuff. It was my life, my memories, being slowly dismantled. The financial strain came next. My pension, once enough to live comfortably, now had to cover 5 people. Groceries tripled. Electricity bills soared. When the water heater broke, I paid for it out of my savings. Peter always said, "We'll pay you back when we can." That day never came. Then came the whispers. "Mom's getting forgetful. This house is too much for her. We really need to think about care options." Care options. For me. As if I were the one being taken care of, not the one holding everything together. The sound of the front door slamming pulled me from my thoughts. Heavy footsteps came down the hall toward my room, the only space that still felt somewhat mine. "Have you seen my gray suit jacket?" Peter's voice boomed as he pushed the door open without knocking. Ara had told him she'd organized the closets, a polite way of saying she'd moved half their belongings into mine because I didn't use the space anyway. "I hung it in the hall closet," I said quickly, sliding the legal papers under a magazine. He frowned, stepping closer. Too close. At 42, Peter was a big man, and he liked to use his size to intimidate. "I already checked there," he snapped. "Then I don't know," I replied evenly. "Maybe ask Ara." "She's not home," he grumbled. "Took the kids to a birthday party. I'm late for an interview." That surprised me. "A new job?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Just exploring options. Construction isn't what it used to be." Translation: another job change was coming. I simply nodded. "I hope it goes well." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Noah said you had some meeting with a lawyer. Something about the house." My stomach tightened. I'd been so careful not to say a word around the children. "Noah must have misunderstood," I said calmly. "Just updating some personal documents." Peter studied me for a long moment. "Right," he finally said. "Well?" "If there's anything about the house, you should talk to us first." When he left, I sat there in silence, my pulse steadying, my decision hardening. For years, I had been made small in the home I built. Now, I was done shrinking. "You know how Ara worries about you managing everything alone." Peter's words were casual, but the warning beneath them was clear. They were watching me now, suspicious of any move that might disturb their comfortable arrangement. When he left, I reached under the magazine and pulled the papers back into the light. My hand trembled as I traced the crisp legal language, my rights as the homeowner spelled out in black and white. Stanley had been thorough, giving me every option, a formal lease agreement or a clear timeline for them to leave. A crash from downstairs snapped me out of my thoughts. I rushed down to find Lily standing in the middle of shattered blue pottery, her eyes wide with fear. It was a wedding gift from my mother, one of the few personal items I'd managed to keep in the shared spaces. "I'm sorry, Grandma," the 5-year-old whispered. "I was trying to reach the cookies." "It's okay, sweetheart," I soothed, bending to pick up the larger shards. Mommy says you have too many old things anyway, she added innocently. I froze, a jagged piece of pottery in my hand. Too many old things. Like me, something old and inconvenient that refused to disappear. That evening, Ara returned with Noah from the birthday party. I heard her low voice in the kitchen with Peter. I'm telling you, she met with a lawyer, Peter hissed. Noah overheard her on the phone. Don't be paranoid, Ara dismissed. What could she possibly do? This house has been our home for years. It's still in her name, Peter said sharply. What if she's thinking of selling, or worse, changing her will? Their voices dropped lower, but I'd already heard enough. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about their claim to my property. That night, rain pattered against my window as I stared at the ceiling. Lightning flashed, illuminating my room for a heartbeat. In that brief brightness, I made my decision. Tomorrow I would present the papers. Tomorrow I would reclaim my life. Whatever storm followed couldn't possibly be worse than the slow erosion of dignity I'd endured for 7 years. Morning arrived with a strange clarity. I'd expected to wake up full of doubt, but instead I felt calm as I prepared breakfast, the same breakfast I'd made almost every day for 7 years while my daughter and her husband slept in. Pancakes, Grandma? Noah asked sleepily, climbing onto his usual stool, his Spider-Man pajamas wrinkled. Blueberry, I confirmed, sliding a plate in front of him. His face lit up. You always remember. Such a simple observation, yet it squeezed my heart. I did always remember. Noah's blueberry pancakes, Lily's crustless sandwiches, the dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets, the way each liked to be tucked in at night. Would anyone else remember those details if I weren't here? The thought sent a chill through me. Morning, Ara mumbled, shuffling into the kitchen in her bathrobe, reaching automatically for the coffee I'd already brewed. Peter's got that second interview today. He'll need the car. Not a request, not even a full sentence. Just another assumption that my needs didn't matter. I have an appointment this afternoon, I said, flipping another pancake. Ara frowned over her coffee mug. Can't you reschedule? This interview is important. So is my appointment. I kept my voice steady, focusing on the pan instead of her incredulous look. What appointment could possibly be so important? Her tone was dismissive again, the tone that said my life existed only to serve theirs. I slid the last pancake onto a plate. I need to speak with both you and Peter this evening, after the children are in bed. Something in my tone must have landed, because her eyes narrowed. What's this about, Mom? This evening, I repeated, setting down the spatula and leaving the kitchen before she could press further. As I dressed for the day, I could hear them in the hallway, Ara's hushed, urgent tones and Peter's deeper rumble. They were already strategizing, already preparing to counter me before even hearing what I had to say. For a moment, my resolve wavered. What if this made everything worse? What if they retaliated by keeping the children from me? What if it became ugly and traumatic for Noah and Lily? But then my eyes fell on the crumpled photograph I'd rescued from the trash, now resting on my dresser like a silent witness. My daughter was already erasing me from the family narrative. How much longer before the children began to see me the same way? An inconvenience, an obstacle, a person tolerated only for what she provided. I picked up the legal papers from my desk and slipped them into my handbag. Whatever happened next, I couldn't keep disappearing piece by piece in my own home. The day passed in a blur of routine chores and quiet tension. Peter came home from his interview wearing the same forced smile I'd seen many times before, the mask he wore whenever things hadn't gone his way. Ara was unusually quiet, watching me with suspicious eyes as I prepared dinner and helped the children with their homework. At 8:30, with both children finally asleep, I brewed tea and set 3 cups on the kitchen table, a small ritual of normalcy before a conversation I knew would be anything but normal. Ara entered first, arms crossed defensively. Peter followed, shoulders stiff. So, what's this about, Mom? Ara asked sharply, not touching her tea. I took a steadying breath and laid the documents on the table. I've been thinking about our living arrangement, I said. Peter's body tensed immediately. What about it? It's been 7 years, I began, keeping my voice even. When you moved in, it was meant to be temporary. Ara's eyes flashed. So what? You're evicting us? Your own family? I'm not evicting anyone, I clarified, though her leap to victimhood didn't surprise me. I'm proposing that we formalize our arrangement. I slid the papers toward them. These are 2 options. The first is a rental agreement. You pay a fair but below-market rent and contribute proportionally to utilities. The second is a transition plan. 6 months to find alternative housing, with my help if needed. The silence that followed was deafening. Peter's face turned an alarming shade of red. Ara's had drained of all color. You can't be serious, she whispered. I'm very serious, I replied. This situation isn't working anymore, Ara. Not for me. Peter slammed his hand on the table, making the teacups rattle. This is our home. No, Peter, I said firmly. This is my home. The home I paid for. The home I've maintained for 43 years. The home I've allowed you to live in rent-free for 7 years. Allowed? Ara's voice rose. We're family. We take care of each other. Do you? I asked quietly. Do you take care of me? For a moment something flickered across her face, guilt, recognition, but it was quickly replaced by indignation. We've been managing this household for years, she argued, making improvements, keeping things running. Do you know what it would cost to hire someone to do everything we do? I almost laughed at the absurdity. Everything you do? I cook your meals, I clean your messes, I watch your children while you work or socialize, I pay for utilities that have tripled since you moved in, I've dipped into my savings repeatedly to cover expenses. So, that's what this is about. Money? Peter sneered. No, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. It's about respect, about acknowledging that this is my home, not yours, about the fact that my own daughter threw away my photograph and told her children I don't deserve to be remembered. Ara's eyes widened. She hadn't known I'd overheard that particular revelation. You're taking a child's misunderstanding and blowing it out of proportion, she said dismissively. Am I? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled photograph. I found this in the kitchen garbage 3 days ago. Noah saw me retrieve it and told me exactly what you said. Ara flushed, caught in the lie. Peter quickly stepped in. Look, Inez, if there have been misunderstandings or hurt feelings, we can work through them. But these legal documents, this ultimatum, it's extreme and unnecessary. I've tried talking to you both for years, I said wearily. I've asked for help with expenses. I've requested basic courtesy in my own home. Nothing changes. So what happens if we refuse? Peter asked, his tone low and dangerous. You'll throw us out on the street, your own daughter and grandchildren? I'm giving you options and time, I replied, refusing to be baited. What you choose to do with them is up to you. Ara stood abruptly, tears streaming down her face. I can't believe you're doing this to us after everything we've done for you. As she stormed out of the kitchen, Peter leaned across the table, his voice low and cold. You'll regret this, Inez. I promise you that. He followed Ara, leaving me alone with the documents and cooling tea. Despite the confrontation, or perhaps because of it, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth was finally out in the open. There would be consequences, difficult days ahead, but for the first time in a very long time, I had stood up for myself. I was reclaiming my home, one painful step at a time. The next morning, the house was silent. No rattling dishes, no children's laughter, no casual greetings, just the hollow quiet of a home where battle lines had been drawn. For 3 days after our confrontation, Ara and Peter launched a calculated freeze-out. They spoke to me only when necessary, in clipped tones that barely concealed their fury. They left early, returned late, and took the children with them whenever possible. It was psychological warfare, designed to make me crack under the weight of loneliness and guilt. But this time, I wouldn't. I was in the garden, carefully weeding my tomato plants, when my neighbor Margaret called over the fence. "Haven't seen the little ones around lately," she said, wiping her brow with a handkerchief. At 72, Margaret had been my neighbor for almost 30 years. She'd seen Ara grow up, and had quietly watched the slow, painful takeover of my home. "They're staying with Peter's sister for a few days," I replied, the lie bitter on my tongue. The truth was, I had no idea where they went during the day anymore. They didn't tell me, and I'd stopped asking. Margaret studied me for a long moment. "Everything all right, Inez? You seem different." I sat back on my heels, considering how much to share. "I asked Ara and Peter to either start paying rent or find their own place." Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "Well, it's about time. That's been coming for years." Her immediate support loosened something tight in my chest. "They're not taking it well," I admitted. "Of course they're not," she scoffed. "They've had a free ride for how long now?" 7 years. She shook her head. "They won't give that up without a fight." "I'm afraid of what that fight might look like," I confessed softly. "I don't want to lose my grandchildren." Margaret's expression softened. "Have you spoken to a lawyer about your rights as a grandparent?" I nodded. "Stanley says I have options, but if they try to cut me off completely, it could mean going to court. And I don't want it to come to that." "Let's hope it doesn't," she said gently. "But Inez, don't back down. You deserve better than what they've been giving you." Her words stayed with me as I finished gardening and went inside to prepare a solitary lunch. The house felt cavernous, without the children's laughter filling it. I missed Noah's endless questions, Lily's imaginative games, even the chaos of their toys scattered across the living room floor. But I couldn't give in to emotional manipulation. Not this time. That afternoon, the first shot in their counterattack arrived. My phone rang. It was my sister Barbara calling from Arizona. "Inez, what on earth is going on?" she demanded. "Ara just called me in tears saying you're trying to force them out of their home." My grip tightened on the phone. "It's my home, Barbara, and I'm not forcing anyone out. I've given them options. After letting them live there for years, you're suddenly changing the rules?" she pressed. "Ara says they've invested thousands improving the property, and now you want to charge them rent or make them leave." I almost laughed. "What improvements?" "Peter installed a ceiling fan. Incorrectly, I might add, and painted a few rooms without asking. Meanwhile, I've been paying the mortgage, the utilities, and most of the groceries." "She says you've become forgetful and paranoid," Barbara continued, ignoring me. "That you're imagining things and making wild accusations. She's worried about your mental state, Inez." The words hit harder than I expected, so that was their strategy. Paint me as unstable. It was cruel, calculated, and predictable. "I'm perfectly sound of mind, Barbara," I said calmly. "My doctor and lawyer can both confirm it, but you're welcome to come visit and see the situation yourself." Barbara sighed. "I'm just concerned. This doesn't sound like you." "Maybe that's the problem," I said quietly. "I've been too accommodating for too long." When I hung up, my hands were trembling. Within hours, 3 more relatives had called, each repeating the same script, each questioning my judgment. My niece Jennifer was the harshest. "How could you do this to your own grandchildren? Do you want them to be homeless?" By the time the doorbell rang at 8 that evening, I almost didn't answer. I expected another relative sent to talk me down. Instead, I opened the door to find Noah standing there, his small backpack clutched tightly to his chest. "Noah," I breathed, "where are your parents?" "They dropped me off at Tyler's for a play date," he said softly. "But I told Tyler's mom I wanted to come see you instead. She drove me." I looked past him to see a minivan parked at the curb, the driver, a kind-looking woman, giving me a small wave. I mouthed, "Thank you," and waved back before gently ushering Noah inside. "Won't your parents be worried when they go to pick you up?" I asked. He shrugged. "They said they weren't coming until 9. I just wanted to see you, Grandma. And make sure you're okay." My heart squeezed painfully. "Why wouldn't I be okay, sweetheart? His lip trembled. Daddy said you're sick, that you're confused and saying mean things, and Mommy was crying and saying we might have to move because you don't want us anymore. I knelt to his level, taking his small hands in mine. Noah, I said gently, listen to me. I am not sick or confused, and I will always want you and Lily in my life. Then why do we have to move? He asked, eyes wide and filled with fear. That question, simple, pure, and heartbreakingly sincere, nearly broke me. How could I possibly explain the messy truths of adulthood to a 7-year-old? How could I tell Noah that his parents had turned my love into a resource and now were using him and his sister as pawns? I took a slow breath. Sometimes, I began carefully, grown-ups need their own spaces. It doesn't mean we love each other any less. It just means we need healthy boundaries. Noah frowned. Like when you tell me and Lily not to come into your room without knocking. I smiled gently. Something like that, yes. He nodded solemnly. I always knock now, even when your door's open. I know you do, I said softly. You're very respectful. Unlike your parents, I didn't add. The screech of a car in the driveway cut our moment short. Seconds later, the front door burst open. Ara rushed in, her face a mask of fury and panic. Noah, she cried, scooping him up. We've been looking everywhere for you. Tyler's mom said you disappeared. I wanted to see Grandma, Noah said simply. Ara's eyes met mine over his head, cold, accusing. You should have called us immediately. He just arrived, I said evenly, and I would have if you'd given me your new cell number after you changed it 3 days ago. Her jaw tightened at being caught in another petty maneuver. Without another word, she carried Noah out to the car where Peter sat waiting, engine running. I watched them drive away, a mix of sadness and determination settling over me. They were escalating, using the children as emotional leverage, spreading lies to relatives, isolating me from support. But they'd miscalculated. Every tactic only strengthened my resolve. It proved exactly why this change had to happen. That night, as I locked the door, my phone pinged. A text from an unknown number, a photo of Noah and Lily smiling at a playground I didn't recognize. The caption, "Remember what's at stake." A threat, plain and simple. I sank onto the sofa, the silence pressing down like a physical weight. For the first time since making my decision, I let myself cry, not from doubt, but from the heartbreaking realization that my own daughter would use her children as leverage in a battle for control. The war was no longer silent. It had turned cruel. 2 weeks of Cold War tactics left me exhausted but determined. Ara and Peter moved from ignoring me to outright sabotage, unplugging the internet when I needed to email Stanley, scheduling repairmen without telling me, and most painfully, severely restricting my time with Noah and Lily. The children were confused, caught in a tension they didn't understand. Twice I overheard Noah asking why they couldn't spend time with me, only to be hushed with vague explanations about Grandma needing space or Grandma not feeling well. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when Margaret called. "Inez, do you have a minute? I've got some information you should know." Wiping my hands on a dish towel, I moved to the window overlooking our adjoining yards. "What is it?" "I just overheard Peter on his cell phone in your backyard," she said, voice low. "He was talking to someone about getting your house appraised." My stomach dropped. "What?" "He said they needed to know the current market value for when they take over the property." His exact words. A cold fury settled in my chest. "Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate you telling me. Be careful, Inez," she warned. "They're playing dirty." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, thoughts racing. What exactly were they planning? Was Peter just fantasizing about wearing me down, or did they have a scheme to actually claim ownership of my home? I called Stanley immediately. "They can't take your house, Inez," he assured me after I explained. "Your will currently leaves the property to Ara, but that can be changed, and they have no legal claim to it while you're alive." Could they try to have me declared incompetent? Stanley's pause spoke volumes. It's a tactic some adult children use, yes, but it requires medical evidence, which they don't have. When was your last checkup? 3 months ago. Dr. Hansen gave me a clean bill of health, cognitive tests included. Good. Get a copy of that report for our files. After the call, I went to my bedroom and opened my safe. Inside were my will, insurance policies, and a small jewelry box with the few valuable pieces I'd inherited from my mother. Everything appeared untouched, but Peter's conversation about taking over left me deeply unsettled. I removed my will, planning to take it to Stanley for immediate revision. As I closed the safe, my eyes fell on the framed photograph beside my bed. Ara at her college graduation, beaming with pride as I stood beside her. One of the last truly happy moments we'd shared before she met Peter. Had Peter really changed her so completely? Or had that selfish entitlement always been there, quietly waiting for someone to give it permission? The sound of the front door opening pulled me from my thoughts. Quickly, I tucked the will into my desk drawer and went downstairs. Ara stood in the entryway, alone for once. She looked tired, the dark circles under her eyes matching my own. "We need to talk," she said, her voice softer than usual but edged with tension. Wary of another manipulation tactic, I nodded and led her into the living room. We sat on opposite ends of the old beige sofa, the same one I'd bought 30 years ago, the one they'd been insisting I replace because it looked outdated. "Peter and I talked about your proposal," she began carefully, choosing every word. "We've decided we can pay $400 a month in rent." I almost laughed. The market rate for a 3-bedroom home in our neighborhood was 3 times that amount. "That's not sufficient, Ara," I said evenly. Her lips tightened. "It's all we can afford right now." "That's not true, and we both know it. Peter earns good money at the construction company. You work part-time, you have no student loans, no car payments, and you've lived rent-free for 7 years. Where does your money go?" The question hung in the air between us. I'd never asked before, never dared to. "That's none of your business," she snapped, but her eyes flicked away. "It becomes my business when you live in my home and claim poverty to avoid paying fair rent." Her posture stiffened. "Fine. 600. That's our final offer." I shook my head. The rental agreement Stanley drafted sets it at 1,200, still well below market rate. "It also requires you to pay 1/3 of utilities and maintain renter's insurance." "That's ridiculous," she exploded. "We're family, not tenants." "Family respects boundaries," I said quietly. "Family contributes. Family doesn't erase a parent from photo albums or spread lies about her mental state." Ara's cheeks flushed. Noah misunderstood what he heard, and that photo was damaged. I was going to replace it. The lie was so transparent, I didn't even bother responding. Instead, I reached for the manila envelope I'd placed on the coffee table earlier, expecting this exact conversation. "These are your options," I said calmly. "Pay the fair rent outlined in this agreement, or begin making arrangements to move out within 60 days. I've even included listings for affordable apartments in good school districts." She stared at the envelope as though it might burn her hands. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." Her eyes filled with tears. Whether genuine or calculated, I couldn't tell anymore. "Where are we supposed to go? How could you do this to your own grandchildren?" The guilt trip was so familiar it had lost its sting. "I'm not doing anything to my grandchildren," I replied. "I'm setting healthy boundaries with my adult daughter and her husband after years of being taken advantage of." "Taken advantage of," she repeated, voice rising. "We've been managing this house, raising children, working full-time." "In a house you don't pay for," I cut in, my patience finally snapping. "Using utilities you don't contribute to, eating food I buy, treating me like a guest in my own home." Ara shot to her feet. "I can't believe how selfish you've become. Dad would be ashamed of you." The mention of my late husband was a deliberate strike, and it hit hard, but not how she expected. "Your father valued self-respect above all else," I said steadily. "He worked himself to exhaustion to pay off this house, so I'd always have security. He'd be heartbroken to see how you've treated that legacy." For a fleeting moment, something like shame flickered across her face. Then her expression hardened. "Peter was right," she hissed. "There's no reasoning with you anymore." She snatched the envelope from the table. "We'll look these over, but don't expect us to just roll over and accept your terms." "The terms aren't negotiable," I said firmly. "Either sign the rental agreement by the end of the week, or give me your move-out date." She paused at the doorway, eyes cold. "If you force us out, you might never see Noah and Lily again. Is that really what you want?" The threat hung heavy between us, ugly, unmistakable. "That would be your choice, not mine," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "And it would say everything about who you've become." She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. I sat there in the stillness of the living room, my heart pounding. I had done it. Issued the ultimatum I'd been building toward for weeks. There was no turning back now. Whatever came next would either break me completely or finally set me free from 7 years of slow suffocation in my own home. That evening, I picked up the phone and called Stanley. "Stanley," I said quietly, "I'd like to revise my will." No longer would my house automatically pass to Ara when I was gone. Instead, the will now directed that the property be sold, the proceeds divided between a trust for my grandchildren's education and several charities I'd supported for decades. It wasn't revenge, it was accountability. And the quiet acknowledgement that the daughter I'd raised was no longer the woman living under my roof. 3 days after our confrontation, I woke to strange noises downstairs. Drawers opening, furniture being shifted, hushed voices. I descended the stairs carefully and stopped at the kitchen doorway. Ara and Peter were there, silently packing boxes. "What's happening?" I asked, though I already knew. Peter didn't answer. Ara turned to me instead, her face a mix of defiance and exhaustion. "We're moving out," she said flatly, "since you've made it clear we're not welcome anymore." The drama in her tone didn't surprise me, but the decision did. I'd expected more resistance, more guilt, maybe even legal threats. "I see," I said carefully. "When we find a place," Peter added quickly, "we can move in next weekend." That was fast, too fast, considering the tight rental market in our area. Something didn't add up. "Where?" I asked. "An apartment complex across town," Ara said vaguely. "It's not what we wanted, but since you forced our hand." The guilt trip was so predictable I almost smiled. "I'm glad you found something suitable," I replied calmly. Peter snorted but said nothing more. They went back to packing, ignoring me as I poured my morning coffee. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. It was Margaret. "Inez, you might want to sit down," she said, voice low. "I just overheard Peter talking to someone outside. They're not moving into an apartment. His parents bought a condo last month. That's where they're going." The pieces clicked instantly. Their sacrifice was nothing more than a story to make me feel guilty. "Apparently," Margaret continued, "his parents spend most of the year in Florida. They'll have the place to themselves. Ara was laughing about how they won't have to pay rent there either." I sighed. I wasn't even surprised anymore. "Thank you for letting me know, Margaret." "Will you confront them?" she asked. I considered it. No. If they're leaving willingly, that's enough. Let them keep their pride with their little lie. The week that followed was tense but strangely productive. Ara and Peter packed methodically, taking far more than they'd ever brought into the house, including several things that had been mine. I said nothing about the missing serving platters, the vanished power tools, or the disappearance of my good towels. Small prices to pay for peace. But the children were another matter. Noah and Lily had been told they were going on an adventure to a new home, but they were confused and uneasy. "Why can't you come with us, Grandma?" Lily asked one evening, her small face solemn as she watched me cook dinner. "Because this is my home, sweetheart," I explained softly. "But you'll still see me often." "Promise?" she whispered. Her eyes, so much like Ara's when she was little, searched mine for reassurance. "I promise," I said, though part of me feared it was a promise Ara might not let me keep. Moving day came faster than I'd expected. A small rental truck sat in the driveway, half filled with boxes and furniture. Noah and Lily ran back and forth between the house and the truck, excited by the adventure, unaware of the full weight of what was happening. I stayed in the kitchen, watching quietly as my home was slowly emptied of their presence. It felt different already, lighter somehow, even with the chaos of packing. "We'll be back for the rest tomorrow," Peter said curtly once the truck was full. He didn't meet my eyes. Ara lingered in the entryway, her face unreadable. "The kids want to say goodbye." Noah and Lily rushed to me, wrapping their small arms around my waist. I held them tight, breathing in the scent of their hair, memorizing the warmth of their embrace. "We'll see Grandma soon, right, Mommy?" Noah asked, looking up with trusting eyes. For a moment, everything stilled. This was it. The moment Ara would either keep her word or begin cutting me off. Something shifted in her face. Maybe recognition of the gravity of the moment, maybe just exhaustion. "Yes," she said finally, "we'll figure out a regular visiting schedule." Relief flooded through me, though I knew better than to trust completely. Still, it was something. A fragile hope instead of a clean break. After they drove away, I walked slowly through my house, taking in the spaces that had finally been reclaimed. The silence was different now. Not heavy, not sad, just mine. It would take time to fill these rooms again, with my choices, my memories, my peace. But for the first time in 7 years, I could. That evening, I sat on the back porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset fade over my garden. The air felt lighter. The quiet no longer felt lonely. It felt sacred. For the first time in years, the house truly belonged to me again. My phone buzzed, showing Noah's name, though I knew it was Ara's device, labeled under his for our video calls. "Grandma, can you see our new place?" Noah's excited face filled the screen as he spun around, giving me dizzy glimpses of what was very clearly not an apartment, but a spacious condo with high ceilings and bright windows. "It looks wonderful, Noah," I said warmly, choosing not to mention the obvious lie. "And guess what? I have my own room and there's a pool." His enthusiasm was contagious, melting some of the worry that had settled in my chest these past weeks. We talked for a few more minutes until I heard Ara's voice in the background. "Time for bed, Noah." A moment later, Ara appeared on screen. Her tone was neutral, careful, but not hostile. "The kids wanted to check in," she said. "I'm glad they did," I replied gently. "They seem happy about the new place." She hesitated, then added, "Peter's parents offered us their condo. It wasn't what we originally planned. The unnecessary lie hung between us like fog. I didn't challenge it. There was no need. We'll bring the kids by this weekend, if that works for you," she continued. "They're already asking when they can see you." "I'd love that," I said quietly. After we hung up, I stayed on the porch until the stars began to appear, thinking about how quickly everything had changed. The house behind me felt emptier, yet somehow fuller with peace, with possibility. The pain of those long, difficult years hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something else, something bearable, something meaningful. In the months that followed, a new rhythm took shape. Ara and Peter kept their distance, but true to their word, they brought the children to visit. Noah and Lily spent 1 weekend a month with me, and I joined them for dinner most weeks. Slowly, I began reclaiming my life. I turned Ara and Peter's old bedroom into a sewing room, a hobby I hadn't touched in years. The children's rooms I kept as they were, though I repainted them in colors I chose for myself. I reconnected with old friends, joined a book club at the library, and even started seeing a kind widower named Frank who lived 3 doors down. Life expanded again, filling all the spaces that had once been compressed by tension and silence. A year after they moved out, my phone rang one quiet Tuesday evening. "Mom," Ara said softly. Her voice sounded different, hesitant. "I've been thinking a lot about how things were when we lived with you." I said nothing, afraid to interrupt the fragile moment. "I wasn't fair to you," she continued. "We weren't fair. I think I always felt entitled to your house, your help, your money, like it was owed to me somehow." "What changed?" I asked gently. She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Peter's parents came back from Florida early. We've been living with them for 2 months now. And it's been challenging. I think I finally understand how you must have felt." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I'm not asking to move back," she said quickly. "I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry. For how we treated you. For taking advantage. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Some wounds would take time, maybe years to truly heal. But it was a start, and that was enough. Thank you for saying that," I told her softly. "It means more than you know." Later that night, I sat in my garden, watching the fireflies rise from the grass in slow, glowing arcs. My home was truly mine again, not just the building, but the peace inside it. The confrontation, the fear, the loneliness, all of it had been worth it, because what I'd reclaimed wasn't just my house, it was myself. At 69, I finally understood that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary, it's healing, it's love in its most honest form, love for your own worth, and, in the long run, for the people who needed to learn boundaries the most. In the soft evening light surrounded by the garden I'd tended for decades, I was no longer just a mother, no longer just a grandmother. I was Inez, and that, at last, was enough. Now, I'm curious about you, the one listening to my story. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever been through something similar with your family? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. And before you go, I've left 2 other stories on the screen that I think you'll love, both filled with endings that just might surprise you. Thank you for watching until the end.